First story. Mom demands I give up my prom to babysit my siblings so she can go on her date. So I called my aunt to babysit and went to my prom. Mom found out and kicked me out of the house, manipulating my siblings to think I abandoned them. So my aunt gave my mom a reality check. Now, Mom is begging me to come back home. So, this whole mess happened a couple of nights ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. For context, I'm 17F and a senior in high school. I've been looking forward to prom for weeks, maybe even months. I bought my dress, figured out my makeup, and planned everything with my boyfriend, Xander, fake name, for privacy. This was supposed to be one of the best nights of my life. Instead, it turned into a complete disaster, thanks to my mom. To give you some background, my dad isn't in the picture. He left when I was about 5 years old, and I barely remember him. From what I've pieced together over the years, he and my mom had a toxic relationship, and he decided he didn't want to deal with her anymore. He hasn't tried to contact me or my siblings since, so we've been on our own with Mom. Unfortunately, being on her own has turned my mom into someone who seems more interested in her social life than her responsibilities. She's constantly going on dates or meeting up with her friends, and when she does, it's always me who has to step up and watch my younger siblings, Mason 10 and Lily 7. I love those kids more than anything, but I'm tired of being treated like a free babysitter, while my mom runs around like she doesn't have 3 kids at home. On the morning of prom, my mom dropped the bomb. She told me I wasn't allowed to go because she needed me to stay home and babysit. Apparently, she had a date or a girls' night planned. She wasn't specific, and my plans didn't matter to her. At first, I thought she was joking. Prom is one of the biggest events of senior year, and she knew how excited I was. But nope, she was completely serious. I tried to explain that I'd already made plans, and that this was really important to me, but she shut me down immediately. She said she was the parent, so she gets to decide what happens. When I pushed back, she called me selfish and ungrateful, saying I never appreciated all the things she does for me, which, let me tell you, aren't many. I was frustrated, but I wasn't going to let her ruin my night. I called my aunt, her sister, and explained the whole situation. My aunt and I are really close. She's in her early 40s and has always been more of a mom to me than my actual mom. She and my mom don't get along, probably because my aunt isn't afraid to call her out on her BS. When I told her what was happening, she didn't hesitate to step in. She said she'd come over and babysit Mason and Lily so I could go to prom. I told my siblings about the plan, hugged them, and promised I'd come back after prom to check on them. Mason even gave me a thumbs up and said, "Have fun. You've earned it." Prom night was magical. Xander picked me up. We danced all night, and for a few hours, I felt like a normal teenager. It was everything I hoped it would be, and I'm so grateful I got to experience it. But the next morning, everything came crashing down. When my mom got home the night before and saw my aunt at the house, she lost it. She viewed me calling my aunt as some kind of betrayal. I guess, in her mind, I was supposed to blindly follow her orders and cancel my plans without question. She didn't say anything to my aunt at the time, but the next morning, as soon as I walked through the door, she was waiting for me. The second I stepped inside, she started screaming at me. She called me selfish, a bee, a brat, you name it. She said I had embarrassed her by dragging my aunt into the situation. At first, I tried to explain my side of things, but she wouldn't let me get a word in. That's when I finally snapped. I've spent years keeping my mouth shut and taking her crap, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I told her everything I'd been bottling up, the way she constantly dumps her responsibilities on me, how she puts her social life above her kids, and how I'm tired of being treated like a live-in nanny instead of her daughter. I wasn't yelling, but I was firm, and I made my point crystal clear. Apparently, she couldn't handle being called out because she completely snapped. She grabbed me by the arm, dragged me to the front door, and screamed at me to get the hell out of her house. Mason and Lily were crying, begging her to stop. But my mom didn't care. She pulled me away, shoved me outside, and slammed the door in my face. Standing on the porch, I was in complete shock. It took me a few minutes to process what had just happened. Then I called Xander. He came to pick me up, and I've been staying at his house ever since. His parents have been amazing. They're so kind and understanding, and they told me I can stay as long as I need to. After I got settled at Xander's, I called my aunt and told her everything. She was furious. She said my mom's behavior was completely unacceptable and that she's going to handle it. Knowing my aunt, she's not going to let this slide. But now I feel torn. Mason and Lily have been texting me non-stop, saying they miss me and want me to come home. Mason even wrote, "Why did you leave us?" And Lily sent me a crying emoji saying, "Please come back." I'm almost 100% sure my mom manipulated them into thinking I abandoned them. She's done this kind of thing before, twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. The idea that they might think I willingly left them breaks my heart. At the same time, I know I can't go back to that house. I'm done being her punching bag and her unpaid babysitter. My aunt is coming over tomorrow to talk to me in person, so hopefully, she'll have some advice on what to do next. For now, I'm just taking things one day at a time. TLDR. My mom told me to skip prom to babysit my siblings so she could go out. I called my aunt to babysit instead and went to prom. When my mom found out, she flipped out, called me every name in the book, and kicked me out. I'm staying at my boyfriend Xander's house now. My siblings are texting me, saying they want me to come home, but I'm almost certain my mom manipulated them into thinking I abandoned them. My aunt is furious and says she's going to handle it. Edit. I'll update when I figure out my next steps. If anyone has advice on how to handle my mom or help my siblings without going back, I'd really appreciate it. Update. Hi, everyone. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all the support and advice on my last post. I've read every single comment, and it means so much to me to know that there are people out there who care about what I'm going through. Things have been really chaotic over the last few days, so here's the promised update. After my mom threw me out, I stayed at my boyfriend Xander's fake name house for a couple of nights. His parents have been amazing. They treated me like I was part of the family and made sure I was comfortable. Still, I knew I couldn't stay there forever. It wasn't fair to them, and I didn't want to feel like I was imposing. My aunt, who has been my biggest source of support through all of this, came over to Xander's to talk. She hugged me the moment she walked in and promised me that things would be okay. Honestly, I felt like I was finally able to breathe for the first time since all this started. She sat me down and told me that she had already gone to talk to my mom. Apparently, she didn't hold back. She said she called my mom out for kicking me out and told her it was abusive and completely unacceptable. My aunt even said she threatened to involve CPS if my mom didn't stop treating me this way. When I heard that, I was shocked. I know my aunt is protective of me, but I never expected her to go that far. When I asked her about the CPS thing, she mentioned that my mom had a history of questionable behavior that I might not even know about. She didn't get into specifics, but the way she said it made me feel like this isn't the first time someone has had to intervene with my mom. She brushed it off by saying, "That's a story for another day." Apparently, my mom agreed to let me come back home after their conversation. But my aunt wasn't about to let me go back into that house without backup. So she told me we were going over there together to sort everything out. I didn't really have a choice, so I agreed. When we got to the house, Mason and Lily were at school, which was a huge relief. I didn't want them to be around for what was about to happen. My mom was waiting for us, and I could tell she was still furious about the whole prom thing. But she also looked nervous having my aunt there. Things started off tense. My mom immediately made it about how I disrespected her and how I needed to apologize and start acting like a good daughter again. I just sat there because, honestly, I didn't even know what to say. That's when my aunt stepped in. She told my mom that I had nothing to apologize for and that I wasn't coming back to live under her control. Then, out of nowhere, she said I'd be moving out entirely. I was stunned. I had no idea my aunt was planning to say that, and judging by my mom's reaction, neither did she. My mom's face went completely pale, and she just started rambling about how I couldn't do this and how I was her daughter and belonged at home. She kept bringing up Mason and Lily, saying things like, "I can't raise them on my own," and "You can't just abandon them." Hearing that made my stomach turn. I love Mason and Lily more than anything, and the thought of leaving them behind hurts so much. But I also knew that my mom was just using them as a way to manipulate me. It's something she's done before, twisting things to make me feel guilty so that I'll do what she wants. My aunt didn't let her get away with it. She told my mom that if she couldn't handle raising her kids, that was on her, not me. She reminded her that I've been acting like a third parent for years, picking up all the slack while she runs off to live her life. My aunt was so calm but firm, and I could see my mom starting to crack under the pressure. Then my mom tried to turn it back on me, saying that I'd regret leaving and that I wouldn't last without her. My aunt just shut her down completely. She told her that if things didn't change, she would follow through on the CPS threat and make sure someone stepped in. By the time the conversation was over, my mom looked completely defeated. She didn't argue anymore, but I could tell she was still seething inside. My aunt drove me back to Xander's house afterward, and the entire ride, I just sat there processing everything. I couldn't believe my aunt was serious about me moving in with her. When we got back, my aunt asked me what I wanted to do. She said her house was always open to me, but she wasn't going to force me to leave my siblings if I wasn't ready. And that's the part that's been tearing me up inside. Mason and Lily have been texting me non-stop since this whole thing happened. They keep asking when I'm coming home and saying how much they miss me. At first, I thought it was just them being sweet, but the more I think about it, the more I'm sure my mom is feeding them these ideas. She's making them think that I abandoned them on purpose, and it's breaking my heart. As much as I want to escape this toxic environment, I can't bring myself to leave Mason and Lily right now. They're too young to understand what's really going on, and I don't want them to feel like I don't care about them. So, for now, I've decided to stay at my mom's house. I know it's not the best decision for me, but I feel like it's the right one for my siblings. My aunt understands, but she made me promise to call her if things get bad again. She even mentioned helping me get legal emancipation if it comes to that. Just knowing I have her support makes me feel a little less trapped. Things are still really tense at home. My mom hasn't apologized or even acknowledged how badly she screwed up. She's been mostly ignoring me, which is honestly better than her screaming at me like before. I'm focusing on spending time with Mason and Lily and trying to keep the peace as much as I can. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm taking it one day at a time. If nothing else, I know I have options now, and that's more than I had before. TLDR. My aunt confronted my mom and threatened to involve CPS if she didn't start treating me better. She said I'd be moving in with her, which sent my mom into a panic. My mom tried to guilt trip me with my siblings, and while I know it's manipulation, I've decided to stay at home for now to be there for Mason and Lily. Things are tense, but I have my aunt's full support if things get worse. Second story. I beat the SHT out of my golden child brother after he called my dead daughter a little shit and said he is glad my daughter died for ruining his life by exposing his cheating to his girlfriend. Still, parents took his side, demanding an apology. Last night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I punched my brother in the face. And honestly, I can't even say I regret it. Not after the crap he said about my daughter. My dead daughter. I've been running it over in my head since it happened, and every time I just get angrier. I don't know, maybe I crossed a line, but I can't shake the feeling that he deserved every bit of it. Let me explain. My daughter, Lily, died 6 months ago. She was only 16. A car accident. I don't think I'll ever be able to say those words without feeling like someone's squeezing my chest. It's still so raw. She was my firstborn, my baby girl, and honestly, she was incredible. Stubborn as hell, sure, but she had this spark. If something wasn't right, she'd speak up. She couldn't just sit by and let things slide, even if it would have been easier for her. I think that's why she always butted heads with my brother, Mike. He's 35, 7 years younger than me, and the golden child in my parents' eyes. He's always been spoiled rotten. They've been bending over backward for him his whole life, no matter what kind of crap he pulled. But Mike isn't just spoiled, he's an absolute piece of work. He's arrogant, manipulative, and somehow thinks he's smarter than everyone else in the room. He can't hold down a real job. He still mooches off my parents, and yet he walks around acting like the world owes him something. I've tried to keep the peace with him over the years for the sake of my parents, but Lily, she didn't let him get away with anything. 2 years ago, she found out what kind of person he really was, and after that, things between them were never the same. Here's what went down. At the time, Mike was dating Emily, this really nice, down-to-earth woman. Honestly, I don't know how he managed to land someone like her, because she was way out of his league in every possible way. She was kind, intelligent, gorgeous, the whole package. But apparently, that wasn't enough for Mike because, surprise, surprise, he was also hooking up with another woman on the side. Jessica. Now, neither Emily nor Jessica knew about each other. Mike was juggling them both, lying through his teeth, and thinking he was the smartest guy in the room. And for a while, it worked. But then Lily found out. She caught wind of it somehow. Honestly, I think Mike slipped up around her because he always underestimated her. She came to me and Rachel, my wife, about it, furious, saying it wasn't fair for Emily and Jessica to be lied to like that. Rachel, and I told her to stay out of it. We thought it wasn't her fight, and honestly, I just didn't want her getting dragged into Mike's mess. But Lily, she wasn't the type to let something like that go. She confronted Mike directly and told him to come clean to Emily before she did. And, well, Mike being Mike, he laughed in her face. He told her to mind her own business and even called her a nosy little brat. That was a mistake. Lily didn't back down. When Mike refused to tell Emily the truth, she went to her herself. She laid out everything. And just to make sure the whole thing couldn't be spun into one of Mike's lies, she also found Jessica on social media and let her know what was going on. Both women dumped him immediately. Mike was furious. He showed up at my house that night, screaming at Lily for ruining his life. I threw him out, but he never forgave her for it. Every family event after that, he'd make snide comments about her, calling her dramatic, saying she loved playing the hero. Lily mostly ignored him, but I could tell it bugged her. And then, she was gone. I don't even know how we've made it through the last 6 months. Rachel and I are just barely holding it together. Every day feels like this endless uphill climb. My parents, they've been no help. They don't even like to talk about Lily, like pretending she didn't exist somehow makes things easier. They insisted on hosting a family dinner for the holidays, saying it would help us heal. Rachel didn't want to go. Neither did I. But my parents wouldn't let it go, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to argue with them. So we went. And I regret it more than I can even say. It was awkward from the start. My parents were doing their usual thing, doting on Mike, acting like he's the second coming of Christ, while barely acknowledging Rachel and me. I could feel Rachel tensing next to me every time my mom made one of her passive-aggressive comments about how some people let grief consume them. But we gritted our teeth and sat through it because, I don't know, I guess I thought we could just get through the night and leave. But Mike couldn't help himself. It started small. He made a comment about how Lily was always dramatic and loved stirring up trouble. I shot him a warning look, and Rachel squeezed my arm under the table, like she was telling me to just let it go. But then he brought up Emily. He said, "Your kid ruined my relationship, you know? Emily might have been too good for me, but at least I didn't have to deal with her self-righteous crap anymore." That was it. I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. I snapped. "She didn't ruin anything, Mike. You did that all by yourself." I should have left it there. But then he leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Yeah, well, good thing that little SHT isn't around anymore to cause more drama." I don't even remember standing up. All I remember is my fist connecting with his face and the sound of his chair hitting the ground. Now my parents are furious. They're saying I overreacted, that I'm letting my grief make me violent. They want me to apologize. I told them to shove it, and Rachel backed me up. But now everything's a mess. My parents are acting like I'm the bad guy. Mike's playing the victim, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. Part of me wants to cut them off completely, but another part of me wonders if I just made everything worse. So, Reddit, was I wrong? Should I have kept my cool? Or was this just the inevitable fallout of a lifetime of my family, letting Mike get away with everything? Comments. Comment 1. I'm sorry, but I really don't get why you're still in contact with these people. Your brother is clearly a toxic waste of space, and your parents have been enabling him his entire life. They've made it clear they don't respect you or your family. Why put yourself and your wife through this over and over again? What's keeping you tied to them? Is it guilt, obligation, or are you holding out hope that something will change? Because honestly, at this point, it doesn't sound like it's worth it. OP. Honestly, it's not because of hope or obligation. It's because of financial struggles. Things have been tight for me and Rachel the past couple of years, and my parents have been helping us out here and there. I hate to admit it because it feels so SHTTY to say out loud, but I think that's part of the reason I've kept putting up with them. When you're in a tough spot financially, it's hard to turn your back on people who are helping you, even if they're toxic as hell. It's not something I'm proud of, but that's the reality of it. That said, after what happened last night, I'm not sure I'll ever contact them again. I've been sitting here replaying everything in my head, and I just can't see a way forward with them. No amount of financial help is worth putting up with the constant disrespect, the enabling of Mike, or the way they've treated Rachel and me. I'll figure out another way to make ends meet because staying tied to them just isn't sustainable anymore. Last night was my breaking point, and I think it's time to move on no matter how hard that's going to be. Comment 2. Look, your daughter sounds like she was an amazing kid with a strong sense of justice, but I'm struggling to understand why she got so deeply involved in your brother's relationships. You mentioned that she gave him a chance to come clean first. What was her end goal there? Was she trying to help Emily and Jessica? Or was it more about calling out your brother's bullshit? It just seems like a lot of drama to take on at 16, especially since it was bound to blow up in her face. I'm not saying Mike wasn't in the wrong, he totally was. But did you ever talk to Lily about why she felt like she needed to get involved? OP. That's a fair question. And honestly, I asked her the same thing when it happened. Lily was one of those people who just couldn't look the other way when she saw something wrong. I think part of it was her personality. She couldn't stand liars or people who took advantage of others. But part of it was that she genuinely cared about Emily. They weren't super close, but Emily had always been kind to Lily, treating her like an adult instead of just the niece. I think Lily felt like she owed it to Emily to tell her the truth. Did I agree with her decision? Not really. At the time, I told her it wasn't her place to get involved. But she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dad, if it were Mom, wouldn't you want someone to tell her?" And that kind of hit me. She wasn't doing it to cause drama. She was doing it because she thought it was the right thing to do. I knew it would blow up, but I didn't realize just how bad it would get. I probably should have pushed harder for her to stay out of it. But honestly, I respected her conviction. She wasn't the kind of kid who backed down easily. And I think she believed it was worth the fallout if it meant Emily and Jessica didn't get strung along by Mike's lies. In hindsight, though, maybe I should have stepped in more. Comment 3. I have to ask, when your daughter passed, how did your parents react? Did they show any kind of remorse or sympathy for you and your wife? Were they even remotely supportive? Or did they brush it off the way they seemed to brush off everything else? And what about your brother? Was he just as awful then? Or did he at least pretend to care? Because of the way you've described them, I'm struggling to picture any of them stepping up when it actually mattered. OP. I've thought about this a lot, and I think things shifted with my parents after Lily exposed Mike's cheating. Before that, they were fine with her. They weren't overly involved grandparents, but they treated her decently enough birthdays, holidays, small talk at family dinners. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when she blew up Mike's relationships by exposing his affairs, it was like a switch flipped. My parents started looking at Lily as the troublemaker. They hated that she'd embarrassed Mike, and I think they resented her for creating tension in the family. I heard my mom say once that Lily was too opinionated for her own good, which still pisses me off. They didn't outright say they disliked her, but their attitude toward her definitely changed. They were colder, more dismissive, and would brush her off whenever she tried to engage with them. It was like they'd written her off because she dared to stand up to Mike. When Lily died, they did the bare minimum. They showed up at the funeral, sent flowers, and said the usual things people are expected to say in those moments. But it all felt hollow. They never really checked in on Rachel or me after that. No calls, no visits, nothing. I don't know if it was guilt or discomfort, but they acted like the whole thing just didn't happen. And to make things worse, they kept tiptoeing around Mike, like his feelings were the priority, even though he barely acknowledged Lily's death at all. Speaking of Mike, his reaction was exactly what you'd expect. He didn't care. Not even a little. He didn't come to the hospital, didn't call, and didn't offer any kind of support. He came to the funeral, but only because my parents made him, and he left early. He hasn't mentioned her name since. I didn't expect much from him, but the complete lack of humanity still shocked me. And now, with what he said last night, I know he didn't just hate Lily, he's glad she's gone. That's something I'll never be able to forgive. Looking back, it's obvious that they all started resenting Lily after the cheating incident. But I thought they'd at least set that aside when we lost her. I was wrong. That moment opened my eyes to how little they actually cared about her or about us. And after last night, I think it's time to finally cut them out for good. Third story. 72 hours after getting married, I got sawed and ghosted every family member and friend. It's been 6 months. How do I reconcile with them? Edit. Ages/dates changed slightly for anonymity. Hi Reddit. This one is a tough one to post. There are a lot of details to this story, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. TLDR. Just 72 hours after being married, I got brutally sad while on my honeymoon. I went into deep shock and was Mia from life for pretty much 6+ months. As I try to reconnect with some important family and friends, particularly my best friend, I am not having a lot of luck. I'm looking for advice on how to re-engage and approach the situation gracefully. Important background context. In the 1.5 years prior to my wedding/marriage, I was riddled with a really terrible physical illness. Over that time period, I was hospitalized more than 20 times, including right up to the day before my wedding. My family friends were supportive and in my corner. This caused a huge feeling that I was a burden that I couldn't shake, which becomes relevant later. Then, just a few days after my wedding, I was sad brutally by a stranger after landing in the hotel in the foreign country we were honeymooning at. I had only been married for about 72 hours. It was my first real sexual experience. I don't want to share too many details here. It would take forever for me to explain just how diabolical it all was. Whatever is the worst you can imagine. It was in that ballpark. The aftermath of this event wreaked havoc on my mind, body, and soul. The attack itself caused multiple physical injuries that took me months to fix through surgeries and exacerbated my already existing chronic illnesses. After returning home, I was hospitalized on and off for 6 months and spent 50% of that time period in the hospital. I had clinical catatonia and completely shut down. I was a hollow ghost, incapable of any meaningful interaction. I was paralyzed by the fear and shock. I also had to deal with the images in my head, the foreign assault case, and the distress that my new husband was deeply suffering from as well. The pain, guilt, shame, and everything else consumed me. I completely shut down. I didn't answer any phone calls, texts, emails, or anything. This went on for about 6 months. My thought process at the time was that I did not want to burden my family friends with such a horrific story, particularly after they had just seen me get married. If I couldn't handle it, how could they? It would be too devastating and would just add to the list of burdensome events in my life. For those closest to me, I know that this would consume them. I justified this in my head by saying that I would take the time I need, recover, not burden them with my trauma recovery, and that nobody would miss me anyway, because I was worthless, used, broken, and disgusting. I also knew that if I answered connected with folks I was close to, I would pour my heart out and tell them everything, and I was scared of hurting them. I barely spoke to my own mother, and she never knew of anything related to the assault. She was told that I just had a lot of health issues, same as I did before I got married, and that I had to be hospitalized a lot for surgeries. Other than my husband, doctors, and professionals, I haven't to this day told another soul. It's hard to explain why it was so difficult for me to reach out or be responsive to those closest to my heart, or why I was consumed by so much guilt. As I've worked with a therapist for the past year, they have explained to me that this is the sad reality after a trauma that extreme. It wasn't personal in any way, as there was really no one that I was speaking to at the time, and I ignored every call and text, no matter how important. I wouldn't respond to lawyers, credit card companies about bills many months late, collection agencies, or anybody. Like I said, complete shutdown. My wedding plus assault was a little over a year ago. About 6 months after the trauma, I was starting to feel able to reconnect with friends. Most friends/family were able to connect without explanation. They assumed that I was traveling the world, getting settled with new married life, as I had never moved away from my parents up to that point, and didn't take it too personally. Even my maternal aunt, who is the closest thing to a second mother to me, didn't hear from me for those first 6 months as well. I'm having a tougher time with other friends/family, particularly my best friend. We were as thick as thieves, and she's the closest thing to a sister that I'll ever get. We've been friends for 10 plus years and always shared everything. She's the one who pulled my wedding together. She stayed up with me all night the night before my wedding, went wedding dress shopping with me in another state, and let me cry on her shoulder for who knows how many hours during the toughest parts of my life. I feel her absence viscerally. Over the past 6 months of me doing a bit better, I have been to 2 social events with my husband. As I meet new people, I find myself just talking about her, how proud I am to have her as a friend, and how cool she is. I ache every day that we've disconnected in this way. She reached out to me in those 6 months after my marriage quite a bit via text. And as with all people and things, I was an unresponsive, catatonic ghost. For the past 6 months, I've reached out to her, but mostly said vague things to try and reconnect, and haven't mentioned anything about the trauma. Stuff along the lines of, I miss you. I'm sorry I've been a terrible friend. I would love to speak when you feel ready, and have had no luck. She hasn't responded to me or opened some of my messages. I know and validate that it must be deeply upsetting to invest so much in a wedding, be such close friends for so many years, and then have me suddenly ghost. It must also be really scary. She must have worried sick that something had happened. Ghosting is a terrible thing, and I wish I could explain to her that it had nothing to do with her and everything to do with what happened in that hotel that day. She's actually the only person in the world I would be willing to tell the whole story to. I would trust her with my life. But given that she hasn't responded to me about reconnecting, how do I approach this situation? It's been 2 months since I sent my last vague apology text where I asked to reconnect when she's ready. I know that I can't force anyone to speak with me, but I'd like to give her closure and let her know what happened. I know that my vague messages are probably not helpful as they don't explain what happened, but at the same time, I'm not sure what to do. It's not like I can send a message and say, sorry I got sad, that's why I ghosted you, as that feels too alarming. At the same time, It's been almost a year of going from the best of friends to no connection. And so I understand if I do have to share more via text to explain what happened here. I also do not want to burden anyone else with my pain if that's not the right approach here. I feel extremely vulnerable in this situation and about opening up. Even though I am doing better, I am in no way healed. I started a new job a few months ago and had to take a medical leave of absence after the first week due to anxiety dealing with others. I am still struggling daily in every aspect of my life. Friendships, family, mental health, physical health, intimacy, complex PTSD, self-esteem, marriage, mood, all of it. Even though I am doing better, I am still very raw and can't afford to be more hurt as I try and heal. How do I approach reconnecting in a way that validates how my best friend feels, while also giving her this missing context that would explain what happened? Edit. Since a lot of people asked about my husband, he's been perfectly supportive and by my side. This situation was also extremely difficult for him, and he was very consumed with helping me through those health issues in the first 6 months. I didn't mention him in the post heavily because my question was specifically about reconnecting with others, not about strengthening my marriage. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.